We would like to thank the Missoula Community Access Television, MCAT. Every year and every day, program that we have, they faithfully come and videotape this. If you've missed a program, if you want to see a replay, you can go to the MCAT site and you can see a replay of this or our past programs. We also want to thank the Doubletree. I mean, they very graciously allow us to use this space. The food is always very good. It's always a nice facility. So special thanks to them. And then, actually, he's outside and may not hear me, but we would especially like to point out that one of our board members, Robert Giblin, it's his birthday today. Robert, can you hear me? So as you go out, if each and one of you would say happy birthday to Robert. There he is. Yes, there's the birthday boy. And Robert's invaluable to us. He's our tech person. So when the rest of us get lost, it's always let's call Robert. Thank you, Robert, and happy birthday for you today. I'd like to explain our format for those who have not been here before. It's really very simple. First, a few minutes, I'll turn it over to Susan Hay-Patrick. She'll introduce our speakers. They will speak for about 20-30 minutes, present their program. I see there's clickers in front of you, so they'll explain what those are all about, how you can participate. When they're done with the presentation, then we go into what we call table talk. And table talk is where you have a chance to sit down, and the first thing I like everybody to do when we go into table talk is introduce yourself to each other. Part of the essence of City Club is that you get to know your neighbors and people that you normally wouldn't meet or see in Missoula. So introduce yourself to each other. You know, give your name, maybe a second on what you do and who you represent, a student, where you work, and then talk about the program. Discuss it, what was said, and then what we'd like you to do is format a question, maybe even 2 questions. We have a small group here today. So come up with 1 or 2 questions and then appoint someone to stand up and ask that question. And then we will have someone come around with a microphone and then stand when you're ready with the question, raise your hand, they'll hand you the microphone. Ask your question. We would encourage you to ask questions and not make speeches because we have a limited amount of time, and that's City Club. So again, I'd like to turn it over to Susan Hay-Patrick, and she'll introduce our program. Thank you.
Hi. I saw this same presentation at a Missoula Downtown Association luncheon and thought it was so fun and interesting that we wanted to bring it to City Club. So we have 3 panelists today, 2 from Home Resource and 1 from the city. So if you know Home Resource, you know that in a town full of really great nonprofits, Home Resource is one of our most respected, even beloved, and effective nonprofits. So with us today is Katie Deuel, who's the Executive Director of Home Resource, a triple bottom line nonprofit building materials reuse center with a retail store and deconstruction operations in Missoula. Katie has a master's degree. Actually, she has 2, one in environmental science and one in social work, which explains her diverse work history that includes outdoor education, wildlife conservation, and divorce mediation. Another Renaissance Fellow with us today is Jeremy Drake, who since 2014 has been the Community Engagement Manager at Home Resource. He previously worked for the National Center for Appropriate Technology, which is based in Butte. He worked here in Missoula. He has a bachelor's degree in music performance from University of Southern California and a master's in urban sustainability from Antioch with a concentration in urban waste systems and policy. So 2 very well qualified people to speak to us today. Chase Jones is the Energy Conservation Coordinator for the City of Missoula. He works to coordinate implementation of the Municipal Climate Conservation and Climate Action Plan. He supports Climate Smart Missoula's Community Climate Smart Action Plan, and he leads 0 by 50, which we'll hear about we'll hear about today. He's the person at the city who loses the most sleep over these initiatives. He is also a lead green associate and a level 1 certified building operator. So if you need any buildings operated while you're here, call on Chase. In 2012, he was named the Sustainability Advocate of the Year by the Missoula Sustainable Business Council. So please welcome our panel.
Thank you, Susan. Hello, City Club. I have to say, usually podiums give me a little bit of anxiety as a person that is only 5'3". I am back here. I hope you all can see me, and I'll make the best of it. Usually there's just a little fidgeting and readjustment, but we'll get there. Yeah, thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be here at City Club to introduce our initiative called 0 by 50, or Missoula's Pathway to Zero Waste. As Susan said, my name is Chase Jones. I'm the Energy Conservation and Climate Action Coordinator for the City of Missoula. I have the privilege of serving in that role every day and have been for about the past 4 years. I'm thrilled to be here today with the city's Zero Waste Leadership Team. That's what we call kind of the triumvirate. And from their introductions, you can tell I am thankful and grateful that the three of us get to lead this charge on behalf of the city, and they are a fantastic community nonprofit partner, Home Resource. So Zero Waste in Missoula and 0 by 50, it really just has a cool story and has gained a ton of momentum since this whole thing started about 1.5 years ago. And really that's the goal of today. We hope to tell that story. And if you haven't been able to engage in this initiative or zero waste practices in general, we hope that you leave excited to do so. And we're going to give you sort of the next opportunity to do that. We hope you'll be ready to jump right in. So a broad overview of what we have planned, and I think we have a super fun program planned for you today. We're going to start by hearing from Katie Deuel, and she's going to describe zero waste in Missoula kind of from the beginning. This initiative is driven by the city, but it absolutely has roots in a community groundswell. It's another example, and we have a lot of these in Missoula, where thoughtful city planning, like the planning that we've done in our Energy Conservation and Climate Action Plan, our Climate Smart Missoula Climate Action Plan, as well as our Missoula Growth Policy, sort of meets this community groundswell, and they come together to move an initiative forward and really make Missoula a better place and maintain the quality of life that we all love and get to enjoy by living here. So we're going to start with that story, and it's a really good one. Then we'll come to a fun and interactive part. Someone mentioned the clickers. You do have clickers in front of you, and Jeremy has created a zero waste quiz. And it is a quiz, but we won't be judging you or grading you if you get things wrong. It's really meant to just give you a firm foundation so that we all start on the same playing field of what zero waste is, again, so that we can understand that story. I think it'll be really cool. You get to interact, and we get to see results on the screen in real time. So that is another goal of today, is everyone leaves here with a solid foundational knowledge of zero waste. And then I'll kind of conclude our portion of the presentation by explaining the overall timeline of this initiative, our 0 by 50 initiative, where we are to date on that progress, and some themes, sort of a sneak peek. We haven't released the plan yet, but some of the themes that we've heard from our work and listening to the community and visiting other communities. Okay, so that's quite a bit, and we only have a short amount of time, so I will keep things moving along. We get really excited about talking about this stuff, so sorry if we go over a little bit. But without further ado, let's dive in and hear about the background of 0 by 50 and how this all came about. Katie.
Thanks. So I've been introduced. A lot of, you already heard this, but I'm Katie Deuel, the Executive Director at Home Resource. And I'd like to start just by asking how many people have been to Home Resource? been to our building materials group. Whoa, that's awesome. I was going to say, so most of you know who we are and what we do, and I was going to say you might not know that we're a triple bottom line nonprofit, but I know you know that because Susan just told you. So I'm just going to keep going from there. I was going to tell you just a little bit about Home Resource and then go into just a brief story about how we got started in this zero waste work. What it means to be a triple bottom line business is that our social, environmental, and community impact is as important to us as our economic bottom line. And as a nonprofit, it means that we are mission driven. So our mission is to reduce waste and build a more sustainable, more vibrant and sustainable local economy. And our store is the means and the foundation of all that we do. That's how we do that. But we do also do a bunch of other things to move that mission forward. So we do have deconstruction services, as Susan mentioned. That means we take buildings apart by hand. And then all those materials come back to our store. So they go out, they're distributed in the community. They're part of our affordable materials that we offer to Missoulians. And they stay here in the community. They don't go to the landfill. We also have a program we call our work programs, where we employ people who are experiencing barriers to employment. So these are folks who may have a history of addiction or incarceration. They may have mental or physical disabilities, or they may be youth or elders, and then I always say, or anything in between, because we all may experience barriers to employment at some point. But we have a lot of work there at Home Resource. We do keep over 900 tons of material out of the landfill. Last year, that's 2.5 tons a day that we move through our store. We're open 360 days a year. And 96% of what we spend, our over $1 million budget, is spent locally here in Missoula. So we have a lot of work to do. It's kind of the point there. I always say the dust never settles at Home Resource. It's not the cleanest place, but we're keeping busy. So we hire folks who are experiencing these barriers. We give them not only jobs, but job skills, and then most importantly, a reference. So one of the biggest challenges for people when they're going out to seek a job, if they haven't had a job for a while, is to have that first reference. So that's a fun piece of what we do. Another thing that we do, a part of our mission is also about education, is we have our ZWAP program. That's ZWAP, Knock Out Waste in Missoula. And so it's an education program for 5th graders. ZWAP stands for our Zero Waste Ambassadors program. So I'm not going to talk much about that, but it's a little teaser that did get started after we got involved with zero waste. So this is how we got started. The city was developing its climate action plan. Chase was very involved with that. And they had a couple of summits. And at the second summit, and these were to gain information about what to put in the plan and do some prioritizing, the second summit was divided into 12 buckets, they called it, or focal areas. And one of those buckets was a waste bucket. And I was invited to facilitate the waste bucket because of my position at Home Resource, which is excellent. And I just want to say that waste just isn't very sexy. Maybe you've noticed that, but people don't get that excited about waste. So there are these 12 buckets, and one's transportation, and one's air quality, and one's healthy, thriving communities, and people are just flocking to those discussions. And I'm sitting at the waste discussion, and I've got Jeremy, who I invited, the other facilitator who was required to come, a county employee who was required to come, and a MUD board member, which was great. So we sat down and we started listing the things that we can make a difference on in terms of waste in Missoula and what we need to do. And it includes things like composting and reducing construction and demolition waste, because though we keep 900 tons out a year, that's not quite enough. It's increasing recycling. So as we sat down and we made this list and then we tried to prioritize what is most important, what comes first, we realized that we have to do it all together. It's got to be the whole enchilada, or it's just not going to work. It's not something that we can pick apart. And it's really about changing our relationship with materials. It's about understanding where they come from and where they go. And it's a simple and very accessible way to start thinking about that piece of our economy that will lead us towards more sustainability. So once we made that decision things got a little easier from there. We didn't have people flocking to our group, nonetheless, but we did start Home Resource, a zero waste Missoula group. We had a number of businesses and business representatives, business owners, nonprofits, and just interested individuals who came and participated in that. And that group led to creating a zero waste resolution, which we did, and we worked with a city council member on that. And the council member brought it to city council. They passed it unanimously on the first go. And when it passed, the council asked specifically, they recognized that the capacity to do this big thing, move our community towards zero waste, couldn't all fall on Chase's shoulders. So they asked Home Resource to stay involved. So we have some capacity and expertise. The city has some capacity and expertise. And we think of it as sort of a public nonprofit partnership or an inside-outside partnership. And that passing of that and us staying engaged led to the 0 by 50. And that is our pathway to zero waste. I don't want to say more because that's what the rest of these folks are here for. So with that, I'm going to pass off to Jeremy. He'll tell you all about 0 by 50.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks again for coming to City Club to learn about zero waste. This is our quiz. Katie mentioned ZWAP, our Zero Waste Ambassadors program at Home Resource. So it's a 5th grade education program, and this quiz is modeled after a quiz we use in ZWAP. So today you get to pretend like you're 5th graders again, and you get to pick up these little clickers, and we got a practice question for you so you can learn how these work. This practice question will teach you how to click your buttons. So A, B, C, D, and E, you'll see the little black circles, find the corresponding letter, and on this question, rate your knowledge of zero waste right now. As you can see in the bottom of the screen, there's a response bar there, so I can tell how many of you have clicked and how many of you are not playing along. I think we have about 40 people here, so I think we're getting close. Let's move on in 3, 2, and 1. See where we're at in the room. Okay, so about 34% moderate understanding of the concept. Ooh, 24% knowledgeable. That's great. 24% beginner. So we've got a nice spread here. Hopefully by the end of the day, that'll even out a little bit. We'll have a shared understanding of what the heck we're talking about. So, here's the first real question of the quiz. Why bother? Right, there's this despondent otter wondering, like, what's the use? Why do we even do anything? Is it because zero waste is good for the planet? Is it good for the economy? Is it good for public health? Is it good for the climate? Or is it good for all of those things? Moving on in 3, 2, and 1. Okay. Yep, I agree. Zero waste is good for all of these reasons. And so let's figure out what we're talking about when we're talking about zero waste. This is the definition of zero waste that was adopted with the Missoula Zero Waste Resolution. And it comes from an organization called the Zero Waste International Alliance, which it's the only peer-reviewed, internationally accepted definition for zero waste. And this is how it goes. Zero waste is a goal that is ethical, economical, efficient, and visionary to guide people in changing their lifestyles and practices to emulate sustainable natural cycles, where all discarded materials are designed to become resources for others to use. Zero waste means designing and managing products and processes to systematically avoid and eliminate the volume and toxicity of waste and materials, conserve and recover all resources, and not burn or bury them. Implementing zero waste will eliminate all discharges to land, water, or air that are a threat to planetary, human, animal, or plant health. How's that sound, everybody? Pretty good. It sounds pretty good to me. So we can get there. Before we do, though, we got to do a little reality checking because there are some things that are getting in the way right now. Let's take a look at some of those things. Do you think Montanans produce more or less waste than the average American? Yep, so this would be per person per day, the amount of waste that we create as Montanans. Where are we? Are we making more than the average American or less than the average American? Moving on in 3, 2, and 1. Ooh. More than 2/3 of us say more, and you are correct. We do. Turns out Montanans, on average, produce about 60% more waste than the average American. Raise your hand if you love to make waste. Didn't think so. So I think it's not because we love making waste. There could be some other reasons. Possibly we don't have the systems in place. Maybe we don't have the right kind of infrastructure yet. Maybe we don't have the right kind of programs or incentives. So there's room for improvement here. For every pound of waste we generate, how many pounds of waste are generated in resource extraction, manufacturing, and distribution of the stuff we buy and use? For every 1 pound of waste we generate, is it half a pound, 2 pounds, 21 or 71 pounds? We talk about upstream and downstream. This is upstream. We're in the middle of the stream. This is all the upstream waste that's generated by our consumption. Moving on in 3, 2, and 1. Over half of you say 21 pounds. A third of you say 71, and you're correct. I heard a recent number that actually says that it's actually more closer to 85 or 86. Whatever the number, the message here is that whenever we choose to reduce our waste or reduce our consumption of stuff, then our impacts on the rest of the planet, really, right? It's a global system, are reduced. What is the hardest material to recycle in Missoula? Metal, cardboard, plastic, glass, paper. Moving on in 3, 2, and 1. Yep, that's the one. It's glass. So it's troubling, right? It's a glass bottle. It's big. It's just so tangible. And it's a material, and all materials have value. I recycle because I understand that inherent value of materials. I think a lot of people do. That's my assumption. And I also recycle because I know that it saves energy when we use recycled materials instead of making stuff from raw materials. So if we look at that energy piece of recycling materials, you'll notice at the bottom of the list in terms of energy savings is glass. At the top of the list, aluminum cans, plastic, paper, stuff that we can easily recycle right now in Missoula. And in terms of energy savings, they have actually a much greater impact, much greater benefit than glass. So while it's really, it's hard to throw that glass bottle in the garbage, I can't bring myself to do it. But these are these other things that I do see in the garbage that really don't belong there. If we think of energy savings, we've got a place to put those already, and so they could be going into the recycling stream. I noticed out back right over here, there's a whole line of recycling bins, and they're overflowing, which is great, kind of, but it's like, okay, maybe we need more recycling bins. But I did see all these things in there, except for glass, of course. Okay, can we recycle our way to zero waste? Yes or no? Moving on in 3, 2, and 1. 73% of you said no, we can't. And you're absolutely right. There's a couple of reasons why we can't recycle our way to zero waste. Let's look at those. These two waste streams make up more than half of everything we throw away. You can pick 2 answers on this one, so click 2 buttons. Cardboard, food scraps and wasted food, electronics, construction and demolition debris, or diapers. That is actually a photograph of the Missoula landfill around Christmas time. It's very sparkly. Okay, let's see what you think. So a third of you say construction and demolition debris, and a third of you say food scraps. That's right. Those are the 2 waste streams. Can those be recycled in the conventional sense of recycling? They cannot be, right? They need other kinds of infrastructure to recycle. We're talking about food scraps. You can't throw those in your recycling bin. Plate scrapings, vegetable trimmings, fallen fruit, all these kinds of things. That's what we're talking about. And food soiled paper is part of that too, like burger wrappers and things like that. And then there's the construction and demolition debris. Anybody ever gone bowling at that former bowling alley? That was January of last year, corner of Russell and what's that street called? I don't recall. Washburn. And a lot of things in there are the kinds of things we see coming through our donation gate at Home Resource. Those are now residing in the landfill. So these are some statistics from the EPA that when you take construction and demolition debris and food, you get more than half of the total waste stream. 40% by weight of everything that we throw away in this country is construction and demolition debris, and over 20% is food. So we can't recycle our way to zero waste because of these 2 waste streams. So I talked a little bit about the value of materials earlier when we were talking about recycling. These next 2 questions are about value. So what's the value of material when disposed at a landfill? This is the average tipping fee for landfills across the state. So every time we take stuff to the dump, we pay for it, and we're assigning a value of those materials that we're bringing there by doing so. So what is the average cost, the average value that we're putting on materials when we're putting them in the dump? Moving on in 3, 2, and 1. 37% said $2.40 a ton. Is that right? I think so, yeah. The actual answer is $45 a ton. So in Billings, it can be as low as $17 a ton to take stuff to the dump. In Missoula, we don't really do it by the ton, but by our kind of calculations, it's in the 80s. Helena is in the 60s, so it goes across the board. But that's the average if you average them all out. Now, just this next slide is an illustration of a another possibility, another way to look at materials. Using Home Resource as an example, what's the value of material when reused? This, obviously not everything that's going to the dump would be a candidate for stuff that goes through Home Resource, but some of that material, like we saw in the Lucky Strike picture, could have gone to Home Resource. So what would have been the value, you think, if some material, of the material that goes through Home Resource, which arguably, if it weren't going to Home Resource, would probably go into the landfill? Moving on in 3, 2, and 1. So 40% of you said $920 a ton. And you're right. That's the average when we took our formula, the data we knew about how much by weight of stuff that we moved through the store in a single year compared to how much we earned through the sales of that material $920 a ton. Now, like I said, that's not everything that's going to the dump, but if we look at the EPA statistics, 40% of the stuff that's going to the dump, a portion of that is a candidate for this kind of material. So we're throwing away a lot of value when we are throwing things in the dump. So here's another look at potential value too. This was based on anecdotal data collected by Bradley Layton, and he estimated that the value of conventional recyclables, bottles, cans, paper, that kind of thing, that end up in the landfill every year, $5 million just in terms of commodity prices. So there's a lot of value that we're not tapping, a lot of untapped value. Another piece of the zero waste idea that was mentioned in that definition, and it's one that is also extremely important. We talk a lot about reducing quantity of waste. This is about the quality of the waste that we're creating. And potentially this has a greater impact on our planet and our health, the health of ecosystems, the health of humans and other creatures. These are the toxic wastes. And it's stuff that we use every day, like this microphone. There's electronics in here that if I just threw it in the dump someday, who knows when, could become a hazard to the environment. And these are everything from mercury thermostats, which Montana actually has legislation that outlaws the disposal in a landfill of mercury thermostats, to the shoes that light up. There's a lot of different stuff. And this is part of a zero waste world, is a world where we're detoxifying our materials so that our waste stream is also less toxic. So now we'll get specifically, take a look at the Missoula Zero Waste Resolution passed by City Council in February of 2018. 2016? Yeah, that's right. Going back in time. 2016. So is the goal of the Zero Waste Resolution a 90% waste stream reduction by 2050? There's a kind of a hint on the screen. 60% waste stream reduction or better by 2040, 40% waste stream reduction or better by 2030, or 30% by 2025. I'm going to move on here in 3, 2, and 1. 79% of you said 90%. That's right. That is why this is the 0 by 50. The people in the zero waste world say zero waste or darn near. And the idea is that at this point in our evolution, there's probably going to be 10% of stuff that we can't figure out what to do with yet. So 90% is considered zero waste. All of the other numbers on this screen are benchmarks that are written into the resolution to help make sure that we are making progress toward that goal over the next several years. So the Zero Waste Resolution asks for some deliverables. It asks that the city staff develop a zero waste plan, produce a baseline study to determine Missoula's waste stream, and ensure public input on the zero waste plan. That's part of what we're here to do today. Okay, last quiz question. The Missoula Zero Waste Plan will identify objectives and actions to get Missoula to zero waste, require no changes of Missoulians' waste behaviors, be written without input from the community, or do all of the work of reducing waste by itself. Moving on in 3, 2, and 1. Hooray. Someone said that it'll be written without input from the community. Well, okay. Now's your chance to change that possibility. So, thank you all for participating in the What Do You Know About Zero Waste plan? What do you know about zero waste quiz? Final question, please rate your knowledge of zero waste now. All right, let's see what happened. Great. I think we bumped it up. More than 2/3 of us feel like we are knowledgeable about zero waste. So with that, I will hand the microphone back to Chase. He'll talk a little bit about the timeline, progress along that timeline, and the next opportunities for you to engage in input process.
Thank you, Jeremy. So now you heard kind of the background story of how all of this came to be, and I'll just hold this. Now you all are geniuses on the topic of zero waste, and you've had a reality check of that scenario in Missoula, and then you understand the zero waste resolution and our marching orders, which kind of brings us to this point. We formed our leadership team, and we decided to kind of plot a course forward. The resolution gave city staff and community partners 2 years to deliver the zero waste plan as well as the baseline study that Jeremy mentioned. And so this is sort of our workflow, if you will, and our timeline. So you can see it starts there on the left with the City Council adopting the zero waste resolution in February 8th, 2016. Jeremy jumped ahead a little bit. We then convened a zero waste advisory committee made up from concerned citizens, experts in the field, and folks who could potentially play a role in all of these zero waste activities and helping to develop the plan. Next, the public input part happened. We hosted 3 community listening sessions in March in 3 different places. We did a similar sort of quiz, and then we had folks break into small groups, and we had them answer 3 questions. Why do you care about reducing waste in Missoula, sort of a values piece? What do you see as the biggest barriers to reducing waste in Missoula? And then what are your big ideas? Tell us what you think needs to happen to get us toward our 90% reduction goal. So we hosted those, collected a whole bunch of input and feedback. I'll get back to that a little bit later. Since then, we have talked with several and various targeted stakeholder meetings. When we kind of plotted this course, we thought that we would have to seek people out. We actually found exactly the opposite. The news of this work came out, and we started getting contacted by organizations all over Missoula. We've had some great meetings with the University of Montana, the Missoula County Public School System, and various other kind of nonprofits, public entities, as well as your standard businesses in Missoula. So lots of interest there, gathered more input from them around specific discussions. Next, in July, we thought we'd have a first draft of a plan. That kind of brings us to today. We don't have a draft of a plan with a bunch of flowing narrative or anything like that, but what we have is an outline of the plan, and we've just vetted that with our Zero Waste Advisory Committee to get some feedback on that structure and flow. Next, and this is your next opportunity to get involved, we will put a tiny bit of narrative to that outline, but we're going to bring sort of the structure of the plan and the main concepts back out to the public in a series of open houses in September. I don't have, unfortunately, any exact dates for you, but keep your eyes and ears open, and we'll be sure to try and get that information to you for the next opportunity to comment on the plan, excuse me. And then our goal is to bring the final draft of the plan back to City Council and the community for adoption by the end of the calendar year. So exciting timeline, and we have done a pretty good job about marching down that timeline. I just thought, since you kind of are giving us an hour today, we can't wait to hear from you, but just a little bit of a sneak peek from the themes that we heard in the community listening sessions, and then they were backed up by the research that we did by studying other communities. We are not the only community in the nation doing this kind of work, and so we had some great models to study. Those themes we heard from our community were backed up in those, and then we also identified the Front Range of Colorado sort of as a hot spot for this work. We learned, we traveled down there to meet with public officials officials in the city of Boulder, Boulder County, and Fort Collins, as well as some of the communities in between, meet with them, sort of learn from their process and how they're doing, and then also tour some of the facilities that make this work happen. So that was great, and that trip also backed up these themes. And so there are 4 main themes. The first being access, and that really is just increasing the availability of services related to reducing, reusing, and recycling. And these include strategies like implementing universal recycling and composting and having zero waste stations in all public spaces and events. It's just kind of building in that access, and so that wherever you are and whatever you're doing, you have a choice not to send it to the landfill, but you have a zero waste choice. Next is education. That's a no-brainer, and that's just making sure everyone has access to information and resources on why reducing waste is important and how to do it. And this includes strategies like developing a universal brand, like the 0x50 brand, and all the way to integrating with ZWAP and the Missoula County Public School System and providing targeted outreach to businesses and other organizations. The third theme we heard was infrastructure, and this is just supporting and making sure that we have the infrastructure necessary to go zero waste. We've already mentioned some barriers in the reality check. I just want to point out, too, we have some really exciting opportunities with the city just purchasing the composting facility. It's now called Garden City Composting. That's a fantastic step. As well as a forthcoming hazardous waste facility in conjunction with the county as well. So those are huge pieces of infrastructure, and there are others that we'll have in the plan as well. And then the last theme is policy, and this section, it looks at policies everywhere from creating incentives and recognition programs and looking at our development services and some building code work, to exploring universal recycling and composting ordinances. And yes, even as an option perhaps, looking at some bans of materials like styrofoam, single-use plastic bags, and those types of items. And so those are the 4 themes. I will kind of end our portion of the presentation now, and we look forward to your table talk and your questions.
So now, table talk. Introduce yourselves. Take a second to say something about yourself and then chat about it, and we'll give you about 5-10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions.
So we were talking about, with construction and demolition being the largest contributor to the landfill, what is being considered in the plan to incentivize builders to incorporate more of those building materials, use home resource, whatever, and perhaps move towards LEED certification. Did I cover it okay, guys? Yeah. Okay.
I'll take a crack at that. What we've learned from other communities is oftentimes infrastructure is a barrier to making sure those materials are kept out of the landfill. In one community, there was a facility that where they recycled asphalt, they recycled concrete. Concrete's a big one. I'm pretty sure L.S. Jensen in town was recycling concrete. I don't know the status of that currently. But one of the ideas in the plan is to increase the opportunities for construction and demolition debris recycling. So it would be those kinds of things. And that looks probably like a facility where those materials could go. In terms of deconstruction, Portland, Oregon is the first city in the nation that has passed a deconstruction ordinance, and that is based on the age of buildings, and if a building meets certain criteria, then a builder is required to deconstruct that building instead of just tear it down. That's a possibility at some point down the road, depending on where we get with those materials from that stream. As far as the lead piece, we looked a little bit at lead at Home Resource for our own build out, and there are materials, recycled material content guidelines for lead, and they're based on the value of materials comparative to the entire project. I don't know that we've talked, in the context of the plan, we haven't really discussed throwing lead in there as an idea, but one of the things that we have looked at is building codes, and currently the state laws are written such that local jurisdictions can't define their own building codes beyond what the state has in place. And so there could be a long-term idea of addressing that. The city attempted to go down the pathway of a deconstruction ordinance a year or two ago and discovered that they couldn't do it. So they partnered with a Home Resource to create deconstruction education materials for contractors and builders. So that's where it stands right now. Have anything to add?
I don't think I have much to add except that last piece that Jeremy did describe. That is a resource that lives in our development services department, both online and kind of a paper copy. And when a demolition permit is pulled, then that contractor or builder receives those resources. And that's a comprehensive list of both materials and outlets for those materials that aren't the landfill. So that resource does exist.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So right now, the way that Missoula does it is all the recyclables that we have right now from solid household waste goes to Republic, and it gets smashed down, put on a truck, and sent out to Seattle. If we increase the rate of recyclables in Missoula, would that still be how we do it, or would we change it up, find another way to get rid of our recyclables?
I would say that's not completely up to us. There's some market pieces in there for sure. But one of the things that we are looking at is trying to find local manufacturing markets for recycled goods. That would help everybody if we don't have to take it to Seattle and they don't have to ship it further abroad. And that's one of the reasons that those communities on the Front Range and in other places actually have a much higher rate of recycling than we do, because they have markets for those materials to be remanufactured.
First of all, thank you very much for a really informative program. I learned a great deal today. So some of us were wondering, this is a monumental effort. This is a huge task you have ahead of you. So how are you going to make it sustainable over this long-term range? Is it through grant monies? Is it through tax dollars? How are you going to be able to fund your efforts now and maintain them to your goal date of 2050?
I'll take a quick stab at that. So one thought on that is, in the resolution, it pointed out that when the plan is written, we need to identify strategies in the short, medium, and long term. And so the plan will be structured, and there will be some thought put to that kind of between now and 2050. So that will help organize. And then, we do have a section. Obviously, we have to figure out how to fund it. And there are some different models out there. We saw some voter initiatives in Boulder. Again, and this would just be an option, but they imposed a trash tax on themselves to pay for some of these facilities and infrastructure. There are also some small fees that can be added onto utility bills, perhaps. That could be another tool to fund some of this over the long term. So we have a few models and options that will be included in the plan to pay for this over the long term.
How does this, did I interrupt you? Okay, sorry. How does this program propose to deal with compost, other yard wastes, in terms of getting it from where it is to the facility formerly known as Eco Compost, whatever it's called now?
So I just wanted to say one more thing on the previous question, and that is just to make sure that you all know, one of the things we've looked at very closely is making sure, when we talk about access, that includes affordability, and it includes including everyone in our community. So it's not just the people who can afford to have recycling pickup who have that available to them. So we don't have an answer to that, but it's an important principle.
Regarding composting, it's one of the low-hanging fruit in any community, right? I mean, we're throwing away a lot of food, and there's a couple of ways to look at that. And there's considering the downstream and the midstream, the upstream. Composting is the downstream solution for that organic fraction that has no other place to go. It doesn't belong in the landfill. No one can eat it. It's got to go somewhere. So for that fraction, universal access to composting collection is what communities are doing. And it's been going on for quite some time in many communities. Larry was talking about living in Berkeley and having the containers out on the curbside for the compostable fraction. That's a great model. Folks are doing that now in the Front Range of Colorado and in hundreds of communities across North America. We will recommend that for the plan, that there is that access to that kind of service in the short term, and possibly in the long term, that being a requirement, being made mandatory. The other part of that organic stream is the food that is still edible, and the food bank exists in Missoula, and they already have some really excellent food rescue and redistribution programs. And in the plan, we'll also recommend that those kinds of programs be expanded and more types of those programs come online, so that we're not just immediately composting stuff that actually is edible, should be going to people or animals to eat.
There's also a lot of really neat opportunities for private businesses to step in and help us create the infrastructure that we need. So a perfect example of that in the context of this question is a compost hauling business. Lots of other green business opportunities as well.
What are your recommendations for top personal things we can do starting now?
I just got off a 4-day float on the Flathead River. It was phenomenal. And I was reflecting on this on my way here because, the default for camping food is buying stuff in freeze-dried food in bags, right? So that wasn't me. I wasn't going to do that. So I have these little containers, and I packed like every meal in these little containers, and it was more work, took more effort, took a little more planning. And I watched this on our trip where I watched these other folks on the trip start to accumulate garbage as they were working through their meals, and their garbage bags were filling up. And I was just eating my food, and I had reusable containers at the end of the day. So a lot of this is around our own personal choices about the decisions we want to make in our everyday lives. And that's kind of the nugget of our Zero Waste Ambassadors program, is that each of us can be empowered to make the kinds of choices that are heading in the direction of zero waste by thinking about the things we buy and the things we use, and aiming for reducing the amount of stuff we consume and shooting for reusability, right? And when the last resort, finding stuff that can be recycled if we need to purchase and use things. So there's this kind of personal agency that we all can step into in making those choices, and that'll get us a good ways there. And we can't get there without that, in conjunction with these kinds of bigger picture systems pieces like access and infrastructure and education programs. So it's really a personal reflection. It starts with personal reflection, like how do my actions every day either move us towards zero waste or move us away from zero waste.
Yeah, I don't think there is another one.
I agree with that, and would just add that it is, a lot of these things do take a little extra time, and there's so many things we can do, it can get overwhelming. So picking what makes most sense to me, what do I want to invest my time or energy in, whether it's in my home or in my workplace, try to get more recycling, just picking something. And then the other thing that's really important is to not beat yourself up, because we live in a culture where our choices are completely absurd, and we can't do this right now in our everyday lives. So we just pick the things that we can do and keep talking about it in a friendly way to other people and laugh when we can't, and keep moving and keeping that sort of sense of hope and, like Jeremy said, agency that, yeah, we're working on this together, and we know when it's not working, it's not just because we made a bad decision. And sometimes it is, and that's okay too. Just don't do it again.
Our question is around education and are we doing anything now? One, for everyone else and you, do you all know and are you telling people that Bayern Brewery takes back any of the bottles from the local as long as they're not a screw top? They can even not be local. And they reuse, which is way better than recycling. Second, is there any place, including home resources, for small appliances? I had a mixer and a coffee maker that both may have ended up in the landfill. Hopefully somebody took them, when I put them out there. But is there any place either to recycle or fix?
I'm going to go backwards, but I'll start with the small appliances. There are places, Home Resource will sometimes take those. We have been through a number of coffee makers for our staff that were donated. But Donation Warehouse takes larger appliances, and then both Goodwill and Secret Seconds will take smaller appliances sometimes. So I can't say on a daily basis who's going to do that. One of the big efforts that will, I think, help us all move towards zero waste that Home Resource is interested in and has been unable to motivate quite yet is to have some fix-it clinics or have places where people can come and learn how to fix those things, whether it's your clothes or your small appliances or your electronics, so we don't feel like we have to throw them away. Now I forgot the first part of your question. Oh, education. So we do have, that's a great question. I think that's one of the biggest barriers. People don't know all the options that are available to them. And there are businesses like Bayern and many, many others who are doing little things like that because they believe in it and they care about it. It's important to them. And getting that message out to people is hard. We do try to shout those out at Home Resource on our social media and the venues that we use. And there also, several years ago now, the Sustainable Business Council produced a zero waste guide, and one of our efforts that we're interested in doing is updating that. So people have this both online and a smaller paper resource where you can go and figure out how to tackle some of those very questions that you're asking.
One small piece of input, there is another business that recently opened called Oreo's Refining. I think she is here actually today, that focuses on e-waste and perhaps small appliances as well. So just another resource for folks to tap into. But that sort of gets at that education piece where we really need to start at this big, broad, universal brand and then tell all of those stories, including a bunch that we've talked about here today, so that literacy is raised in Missoula sort of together and all at once. So those are definite recommendations in the plan.
I'd like to thank all of you. Excellent presentation. It was very educational, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be here. Our next program, yeah, do not take them home. The September program on, let's see, September 11th is, Susan, am I correct? Yes. It'll be healthcare in Missoula with representatives from community Hospital and St. Patrick's Hospital presenting on the state of healthcare in Missoula and the United States. And it should be an interesting program. Again, please go online, sign up. It really helps us if you go online and sign up ahead of time so we can get good head counts for people showing up. Mark your calendar too for October. Our October program will be a debate between the mayoral candidates. So that's always a popular program, and you should see a lot of people here. Again, make certain you get reservations in. Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate you being here. Go online again to sign up on our website, and we'll see you next month.